Hello, we're in England doing art books. We're doing random art books bought in England, mostly off Oxfam, OXFAM, which is a charity website, rather like eBay. And I found the prices on Oxfam are low, lower than eBay, lower than ABE, lower than Biblio for the comparable items. So this is another item from Oxfam, and it's titled Brass Rubbings. This is extremely obscure, perhaps to most people outside England of a certain age, but this book is about brass rubbings, and brass rubbings are tracings which are taken from medieval tombs. So these designs would have been engraved into either marble or more often engraved into large slabs of brass in relief, and children, school children and academics and historians and enthusiasts would have gone around England and taken tracing paper and blocks of wax, and they would have taken the tombstone, which would be in the floor of a church or a crypt or a similar building, public building, and they would have put the tracing paper over the tomb, which would be 6 foot long, 2 foot wide, and they would have rubbed a piece of wax over this tracing paper, which would have made this print impression. And this was a mainstream activity in England until 40 or 50 years ago. It wasn't a strange activity carried on by nut jobs. It was mainstream, supported by the educational system and widely recognised as a pastime. People would go on holiday and they would pick out old churches from the guidebooks, the Pevsner guidebook or the Betjeman guidebook or whatever, and they would go in when the church was unlocked, and they would take these brass rubbings and collect them. And some of the tombs were reproductions which would have been done by relatives and heirs and ancestors. Sorry, not ancestors. They would have been done by the later generations who wanted to tart up old tombs or give their ancestors better tombs. But most of them, on the whole, most of them, 9 out of 10, would have been from the 1350s, 1450s, 1550s. And you'll notice on these, at least, you have fleur-de-lis, you've got devices which are, I'm afraid, French, basically, even though they're in England. They're French devices. So the 3 lions, which is what the England football team wears on the badge, is a French device. The fleur-de-lis, which is the symbol of the Prince of Wales, is a French device. And these people, these knights, would be buried with their hands on their chest, and they would be buried with their feet resting on a Lamb of God or whatever, with weapons or without weapons. These are obviously in chainmail, as soldiers, and they have shields and spears and whatnot. And these characters will sometimes have had really expensive tombs where they'd have a effigy in bronze or brass or marble, but these are taken from the flat versions on the floor, and it is possible that in a crypt, the person who was interred in the crypt would have both. They'd have a flat one on the floor, and they'd have another effigy in a crypt or coffin or alcove in a crypt. So that's what we're talking about, brass rubbings. And this book has got a lot of very boring text in it, but has got some interesting plates, pictures, and for someone who is that way inclined, this art book is really interesting. And as I say, a lot of this iconography it's all from England, but a lot of these characters were French nobles, French English nobles arising from after the invasion of the French in 1066, when William the Conqueror killed King Harold. These chainmail helmets and garments and armour was extremely expensive, and I can't help but thinking of Star Wars and Darth Vader's outfits. It's the same sort of thing. And in the day, if someone wearing that were running at you, you would turn tail and run the other way as quick as you could. This was the latest armour, medieval armour, and you can see there's some Gothic in there as well for more elaborate brass rubbings. You have the occasion here when the tomb has got the wife of the knight, and even on the tomb, the wife is wearing, obviously not military outfit, but the husband, the man, is fully armoured, and they were buried in one tomb. They wouldn't have been necessarily buried at the same time. Very Gothic. So you can see artistically this church ware, if you want, this church art is extremely intricate and beautiful, and you can perhaps see why there was this large amount of people in England who would go around taking brass rubbings. I'm sure in France they would have done it as well, Germany, perhaps Spain even. But certainly in England, when I was a child in the 70s, this was not considered a strange thing to do. I mean, I think it's a peculiar thing to do myself, but when I was a child in Warwickshire, if you said, I'm going brass rubbing at the weekend, no one would bat an eyelid. And you take a car, Morris Minor or whatever, and you drive into the middle of the countryside, find an old church, a Norman church, 1,000 years old perhaps, and you do the brass rubbings, and you get to keep a large piece of tracing paper. And the churches didn't mind, because if there were people accessing the churches which were sometimes unoccupied, even though they're unlocked, the churches were pleased, because often they would get donations, and the more people that were hanging around the churches, the more secure the churches were. So this book is one of the ones I got from Oxfam, and it's rather nice to look back at the sort of things that the people were doing when I was a child, the sort of things people were looking at. Okay, the brass rubbings. Thank you.